Hey, if you're here for the first time, welcome. My name is Joseph. I am a certified life coach, a published author, and a music artist. And I post a lot of content related to spirituality and self-awareness and a whole lot of things in between that. And if you're new, by all means subscribe. And if that is your bag, that's even more reason to subscribe. And for those of you who are already a part of the family here, hey. Today I wanted to talk about something that has been on my heart for the past few days or so, and I felt like it needed to be shared here. Since I have you here, come sit in, grab you a tea or a coffee, and just consider the thoughts that I'm gonna be sharing here in this moment with you. It's strange or deeply revealing how often life gives you just enough to survive, but not in the way that you would prefer to live. For example, borrowed space keeps you sheltered, but it doesn't give you the rootedness of a home. Clean resonance with someone keeps your heart alive, but when it arrives slow, delayed, or tethered to distortion, it doesn't give you the continuity that your nervous system longs for. So yes, needs are being met, but preference is what sparks living, not just existing. And that's the grief of surviving off of provisions without tasting the fullness of your own preference. It's like when you walk amongst others and see them in their routine, it's not far off to wonder how much of what they're doing is sincere and how much of it is conditioning. How much of what they are doing is embodied and how much of it is intellectualized. The truth is, unless you are deeply in tune to patterns, you can't really know. And even if you can read the patterns, people in denial will deflect or dismiss because it's easier than embodying the whole thing. This is where the disconnect becomes obvious. Intellectualization splits everything into binaries: thoughts versus feelings, emotions versus sensations, right versus wrong. But embodiment doesn't split. Embodiment holds both the intellect and emotion, the thought and the feeling, the provision and the preference. And that's what makes the in-between liminal space feel so heavy, because most people are trained to think their way through life rather than feel their way into it. And when I suggest that people feel their feelings, they're often a part of creating distinctions between feelings and emotions instead of entering the raw honesty of what their body is actually holding. That's what intellectualization does. It splits wholeness into manageable parts, digestible sound bites, explaining things to you like you're a 5-year-old, while embodiment insists on wholeness. Which means when your preferences aren't being honored, what you're being protected from might not be obvious. You might not see the distortion clearly in the moment, but the disconnect is real. Because if preferences spark life, then settling for provision alone leaves you feeling grateful but not fulfilled, protected but not fully alive. When provision doesn't match preference, it stirs a fight response. Not the wild, chaotic fight, but the subtle inner push of, I've got to do something. I've got to create a spark where there isn't one. And that fight shows up in survival mode as making activity logs, creating strategies, building plans, forcing productivity, all in an attempt to compensate for the gap between what you prefer and what you've been provided. That spark can cut two ways. One hand, it can highlight all the reasons why your provision doesn't feel like it's enough, which would be reinforcing the grief of an unmet preference. On the other hand, it can reshape your preferences, showing you that maybe the spark you were looking for wasn't in the provision itself, but in your own capacity to generate direction, to transmute lack into clarity. So it's a two-sided coin that holds both the grief of this is not enough and the gift of maybe enough is shifting what I prefer. You see, grief isn't just sorrow, it's an invitation. It's the body's way of saying, be honest, stop bypassing, name what you actually want, and name where what you've been given doesn't match it. And the gag here is that in doing this, you'll see how your preferences aren't really yours. They're shaped by the conditioning you were born into, like family, culture, survival patterns, and all of those things write the early blueprint for you. Then your preferences become either an imitation of that conditioning or a rebellion against it. Both are still tethered to the same root. And then grief cracks this wide open. It exposes the split between what you think should be, which is the fantasy, the limerence, the conditioned expectation, what you think you want, which is the story you tell yourself about that fantasy, and then what feels true to have, which is the embodied preference, which is often the exact opposite of that fantasy. That's why grief hurts. It's peeling away dishonesty of that fantasy. Not dishonesty in the malicious sense, but dishonesty as survival. Survival defaults to distortion because distortion is efficient. It gets you through the moment, even if it's not aligned. And distortion, at its core, is simply a refusal or an inability to be honest. When you put honesty back on the table, survival softens. It stops being a binary of bad, malicious, dangerous, and becomes what it really is, a strategy. A strategy that bought you time, but not a reflection of your sincerest truth. So grief, endurance, and timing are all forcing the same deeper question. Are you ready to be honest about what you're not being honest about? Not what your conditioning told you to want, not what survival convinced you to need, but what your physical body, your nervous system, and your overall being say feels true right now. I often highlight how the systems that are governing us contribute to this dishonest pattern, but here I'm going to go a little deeper. When you peel back the systemic layer, you see that the machinery doesn't create grief. It manipulates the grief that's already alive within you. It weaponizes distortion, exploits your lag in awareness, and profits off the wars you haven't reconciled within yourself. The system isn't only an external force, it's a mirror that amplifies your inner war. The battle between your truth and your conditioning, your honesty and your survival, and the system banks on you reacting because reaction is consent. Doesn't matter if it can be proven or not. Every time you lash out, collapse, numb yourself, or fight blindly, you are unconsciously agreeing to play inside the prison, whether that prison is a concrete prison or an energetic one. That's why what I'm seeing here and the through line of every one of my messages on this platform is an invitation for you to reclaim your grief, because it's revolutionary. When you sit with it honestly, name it, and let it guide you back to what's real, you stop feeding the distortion. You stop consenting to manipulation. You become ungovernable in the deepest sense because you're no longer outsourcing your truth to systems that thrive on your dishonesty with yourself. The revolution here lies in your ability to hold complexity of your grief and your joy without flinching, resisting, bypassing, avoiding, dismissing, denying, fighting, deflecting, and complying your way out of it. There is no way out. It's only through. There's no happy ending because nothing ends. There's only happy when you're able to hold your grief equally with your joy. Grief feels like loss, but honest grief is actually the beginning of your independence. I think that's it for now. And if and only if this message benefited you and you're not subscribed yet, please be a part of this space. Subscribe. Reflect in the comments below. In what ways do you think you're being honest with yourself, but you're only really protecting insecurity because of the fear of judgment or ridicule of some sort? Give this video a like and a share, and let's keep expanding the awareness here. This is the season for deep honesty. So, in the meantime and in between time, please be kind and gentle with yourselves in this right now moment and in the right now moments to come.